This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat. I am joined today by Rachael Bonetti. Rachael has had an impressive executive assistant career supporting execs across London, Dubai, and Melbourne. After many years working closely with CEOs, Rachael decided to take a leap and to start her own business in 2021. Founder of Elevating Corporate Support, Rachael works closely with individuals and organizations to sustain high performance without burning out. A contributing writer to Forbes and a thought leader in her space, Rachael has some work hacks that I'm sure everyone will benefit from, and I'm so looking forward to this chat. I know everyone else is going to enjoy it as well. Rachael, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you today.
My absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to this conversation. I absolutely have to start with an overview of where you're at today. I was looking through your business. I've kind of learned lots about it through my own research, but keen to hear from you. Where is your career at in its current state, in its form as it is now?
As you said in the intro, I started my own business in 2021, and I didn't expect it to pan out the way that it has. So I'm a multi-passionate person, and I think in my career, I stayed with the career I had for as long as I did because I didn't realize I could actually do multiple things at the same time. So my business is now around well-being. So I'm a certified well-being practitioner, teaching meditation, breathwork, and way upper work, but also training administration professionals with the development that I really wished existed in my career. And I even train children or share way upper work, earth mindfulness and meditation with small children, which is wild because I don't have any of my own. So I can't quite believe that I can pull that off every time I go and do it.
Good on you. That's amazing. And it's actually funny you say that. I'm doing a meditation course this week, learning Vedic meditation for the first time, and there's a room full of adults. There's about 120 people there last night with this amazing guy who's in his 80s who learned in the Himalayas and is over in Australia for a couple of weeks, but there was a 12-year-old in the class. He was the only person who wasn't an adult, and my mom and I were talking about the fact that if they taught meditation to kids and taught them how to regulate their emotion and their breath and focus on all of that. I'm going in a complete digression very quickly, but it's interesting you say that because it's very important work to teach everyone, but may as well start when the brains are particularly malleable. Hey.
Exactly right. It's never too late to try, but the more we can sort of set up these future generations, the better the whole world will be, I think.
Yeah. Exactly right. And then with regards to your career, as I mentioned, you have had an amazing executive support career. So in terms of the journey, I feel like business ownership, I meet so many people over the course of my work and through this work and so many different facets of life. And some people just put their hand up and say, I could never be a business owner. I could never be a solo operator. It's not for me. I couldn't do it. So it definitely takes a certain set of skills or characteristics to be able to do it. So please do give us a little bit of insight as to how you sort of pivoted from your executive support career into entrepreneurship and running your own show.
It's an interesting question. I had an idea more than 10 years ago that people were coming to me all the time for advice. Like, how do I do this in my career? How do I get out of a rut? How do I, get through this plateau? Why am I not being respected? And I found myself giving all this advice, drawing from my own career experience. And for about 10 years, I thought someone needs to teach this. Someone needs to share it with others because it feels like a lot of it's common sense and just around empowerment as well at the same time. And then finally, I thought, okay, I think maybe I'll try. So I sat down one afternoon and in about half an hour, I'd written my whole first course, like all the things that connecting the dots that nobody shares when you're starting a new role or a new career. It's always the how to do things, not the why. And I looked at it and I thought, actually, this is something. So I put it out and started selling it, and it sold out within 2 days. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I have to build the thing. And I never really looked back. So it started as a side hustle. And I was feeling my way through with the business, but I also realized that my entire career had set me up really well to be a business owner, because I had a front seat in all the biggest business decisions, sitting in boardrooms, seeing what the pitfalls are and what the mistakes are and how executives would rectify those. So it was free, invaluable learning. It was, my whole career set me up for this, I think.
That is fascinating. And I read one of the articles that you wrote about sort of, I guess, insight into how CEOs can effectively run meetings. It was in Forbes. And I thought that was fascinating insight. And it did make me think that your career, as you say, it has been a front seat in some of these amazing businesses, but also the minds. I think for me, the first thing that jumps out when you say that is I would be so fascinating watching so closely these people who have jobs that are big, huge, busy jobs. Was there any particular traits that you sort of see with those personalities? Do you think that they are as neurotypical and typical as the rest of us, or do you think that that's something special that makes people CEOs of these massive organizations?
What I think it was the fact that they had great mentorship and great training throughout their entire career. I saw the whole range of leadership. Some people were really great people, CEOs, and staff loved them, but they couldn't get tough and create discipline around an organization that helps it avoid burnout and keeps everybody focused on what matters most. So the short answer is no, but what I did notice was the people who did really well, even at that stage in their career, were being mentored and coached in some capacity, informally, perhaps through the chair, or having a coach, keeping them focused on their own development and the impact they could create.
That's fascinating. And I think it's a really good point. And it's probably, if you were to do a sample survey of people in those types of roles across certain cities, I imagine that would be a consistent thread. I think you have so much weight of responsibility that you absolutely need to focus on your own development and your own growth in order to be able to build emotional intelligence and to be able to work with people and to know your own blind spots. So that absolutely makes sense. And that's fantastic that when you set up the business and you started the business, it started to sort of take off. At what point did you decide, you know what, this could be something that when did you turn the side hustle into the full-time gig?
That's a good question too. So I was quite lucky in that I was able to put a very neat bookend on my career. So I'd known very quickly after joining the last role I held, I've worked out that the organization was probably going to be sold, and it was not common knowledge within the organization. It was just myself and the CEO and the chair at the time that knew. So I was thinking about the writing on the wall anyway. And I thought, well, if I don't do this now, when will I ever? So I saw the organization and the CEO I supported through that sale. And then I thought, okay, I'll see how it goes. And I've never looked back. Yeah. But, there's always that comfort that I think for me, I'd rather try something and fail than die wondering. So I thought I can always go back to being an assistant if it doesn't work out, but touch wood, so far so good.
So far so good. That's fantastic. It's amazing that you've done it, and good on you for taking the leap. And I think so many people would have so many barriers of obstacles and just kind of things that would be in their way to prevent them from wanting to do it, and just kind of, because it feels like you're jumping off without a net, doesn't it? I often talk about when I first started Lotus and I was young enough that I don't think it felt like that. I think there was too much naivety and no mortgage and no responsibilities, that it felt like it was very doable. So when people make these calls and take these leaps later in life, I'm always extremely impressed. So good on you for doing it. In terms of your strengths in running your business, in doing what you're doing, you're obviously coaching, you're working with people, there's lots of different elements to what you're doing. Do you feel like you're playing on all of your strengths now? Do you feel like you have been able to create a role and the role that you're doing within your business that plays to all of the different things that you enjoy doing?
Definitely. And I found myself, in fact, I'm just preparing my own podcast episode for my show where I'm actually talking about that, where I'm very good at figuring out whether my time, energy, and focus is being channeled in the right way, and then taking those lessons I learned in my career and being a bit removed and distant from it. Like, is this actually the best use of my time, and does it align with my strategy? So I'm quite fixed on making sure that that's the case, and I've molded my business around that. I'm very fortunate in that way, I think.
Fantastic. And honestly, having that awareness, you're exactly right. I think when you know where you know that the time and energy you're spending on things are the things that you should be doing. I think as business owners, as individuals, if we can figure out the things that feel like a really heavy cognitive drain that can potentially be outsourced or delegated or passed off or in any way kind of taken off your plate. Of course, we're all going to have bits and pieces that we don't enjoy doing, but I think when you can refocus so that most of your time is spent on the things that make you feel like you're working in flow and make you feel like you are doing your best work and playing to your strengths, that is when you can create a space where you are being most productive and working in the best way. And I suppose a lot of your coaching would be around that. So it makes sense that you practice that too.
Yeah. And, to be honest, I'm not at a point where I can have a team yet, or whether I'm not ready to do that quite yet. So I've found other ways around outsourcing, like going on Fiverr and outsourcing tasks that, even though I can do them, because of course, being a former assistant, there's not very much you can't do. But exactly as you said, like, get rid of it, pass it on to someone where it's a better use, so you can refocus time to focus on what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's been one of the biggest learnings in running Lotus. It's exactly as you say, you've been in a role where you are the person who takes charge and control of so many things. So there's a lot that sits with you. And as someone who's run a small business that has grown, we've kind of tripled in size since the beginning of 2021. And so you kind of have to have that awareness, again, what we were talking about earlier, the awareness to go, I could do it, and perhaps 5 years ago I did do it, but am I the right person to be doing it now with all of these people? Is there something that I could be doing to support them that would actually be a better use of my time in a different capacity? And I think that's something it requires a lot of consciousness and intention. I think we could very easily fall into traps of the work that is just the doing work and the busying work and the stuff that keeps us kind of feeling like we're achieving something for 8 hours a day. But it takes a lot more intention to sort of get us to a place where we go, no, this is actually moving the needle, moving the dial, and actually sort of shifting things. Do you find that?
Absolutely. So true.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Well, good on you. It sounds like it's really going well so far. In terms of touching on mentorship and coaching, and you obviously mentioned that in reference to the CEOs, with your own journey, how much of an impact have other people or coaching or I guess other people's influence had in your own career journey up until this point?
I had a few career mentors that were informal, and people who probably wouldn't even realize that I considered them a mentor. But I was also very, I always wanted to be able to show up like an executive and think like an executive so that I could be valuable in ways that were unexpected. So all of the people who mentored me were not administration professionals at all. So it was business owners or other CEOs or executives I'd worked in the past. But the people, one person stands out, and I didn't work for her for very long. She was transferred to another role after I joined her. But it was the first time an executive looked at me and saw me for truly who I was. And I was quite advanced in my career at this point, but I'd only been with her for 3 weeks. And in our first catch up, she said, right, this is what I've noticed about you. And she listed out some things that no one had ever said to me before. So it's quite interesting in the type of career that I had, but being seen and having someone call out what my strengths were in a way that wasn't for their benefit, but for how can I help you and what do you want to do next, was just a revelation.
And I think as well, to your point, roles such as executive assistants, support, back office functions, unfortunately, they can be the wheels of the business, they can keep everything moving, but often they can also be the ones that are perhaps forgotten about when it comes to development conversations and conversations that perhaps would relate to other people within the organization. I don't know if that's something that you've found, but perhaps being pigeonholed or being seen and perceived as also being all over it could potentially be detrimental as well.
Sure is. And I think the other side of the coin about the people who were impactful for me were the people who were displaying behaviors and qualities and attributes that I didn't want to have. And I could see people weren't responding too well, or an organization was. So I actually learned a lot from the people who weren't great for culture or for business too.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in setting up Lotus, having been in previous organizations, there was a bit of a playbook of what not to do. Exactly to that point, it's kind of, you see what works, but you also see, well, that isn't what we wanted and that isn't what we agreed with. And so you can kind of use that in a positive way and add that to your layers of experience as well. What you're doing in exactly what we've just been speaking about, and in your sort of role and within your business, do you find that you get much resistance, particularly in the economic times that we're talking about now, in people and organizations investing in their back office support, operational staff? Is that something that is hard? And it's the first thing that comes to mind for me when I think of it as a potential barrier for I guess that people within those types of roles.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And there's kind of two answers I want to give to that. So I do go into organizations and do full team workshops, and I've been really surprised by how many people want to invest in their whole team. I think there's a realization that they can't do without the support. So if you don't invest in them, you're not going to get the level of ROI that you need. So it's been pleasantly surprising how many wonderful organizations there are that really want to support their teams. Yeah. The other part of the other answer to the question is, I assumed when I started this business that all of my clients would at least seek funding from their employers to do the programs that I offer, or the mentoring. 80%, maybe even 90% self-fund. And when I dig into the why, they're not even asking. Even with offering, here's something you can tailor. This is a good starting point. They'd rather not ask. And I think that's symptomatic of the conditioning that happens, just as you were speaking about earlier, that perception. It's like it's so hard to express your value and what the return will be. It's just easier to pay for themselves.
Which is crazy, isn't it? Because there's absolutely no reason why any individual, particularly a high-performing employee, should be going without learning or development or training. It's absolutely something that every employee deserves, and it's something we speak about so much. Retention is key at the moment, as you would well know. It's hard to find people, it's hard to recruit people, it's talent short. Yes, the market has changed a lot, but it's still not easy for people for businesses to hire fantastic people, and so there's a key focus on retention. And as a part of that, learning and development and training is an absolute kind of core function of it. So to leave out a layer, or to think that a layer of a level of employees or a cohort of employees aren't putting their hands up or stepping forward for that, is actually crazy.
It is. And I think also part of the problem is there's such a misunderstanding about what goes into being a great assistant and keeping those wheels moving that you talked about. And so organizations tend to want to give dumbed down learning and development, and assistants don't want that. They want to be able to think like executives. They want to know what they know so they can help them in a meaningful way. So there's a bit of work to do around that, and organizations stretching their view about what learning and development can look like for that community.
Absolutely. And we've noticed that even as you were talking about that, as executive assistants want to have that critical view and want to have that business commercial sort of hat on, rather than being a support function, an administrative function. I think that's the massive shift we've seen in a lot of executive assistant roles. Naturally, it being an area that we do a lot of recruitment in, it really feels like when we're taking exciting job briefs from progressive companies who really value that role, we're talking in the language of business partnership rather than EA in administration, and it feels like that's the level that people are, a lot of businesses, not everyone, are expecting and wanting their EAs to sort of be. And it means that the EAs are coming with a whole another level of sort of skill and expectation in terms of what they can bring, which is obviously a huge amount. The risk with that is that they all leave to go set up their own businesses, as you have evidenced.
I did give a good 27 years, so I don't feel too bad about it.
No, you absolutely do not need to feel bad about it. No, but it's fantastic, and it's definitely a shift that we have seen as well. Did you think in what you do, the bird's eye view you get, do you see that shifting in how it's changed?
Yeah, I don't hear that many people wanting to start their own business. I'm hearing more that they want those sort of future roles.
Yeah,
so whether it's chief of staff or whether there are roles that don't exist yet to accommodate this new breed and level of assistants who can give more.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, and it's completely in line with what we see and what we hear as well. With as we're talking about it, the kind of evolution of how the role has changed, I do see the next few years being a very interesting time, particularly with the rise of AI and the language models and the generative AI and ChatGPT and everything. We ran an executive assistant event recently, which was all focused around how best practice usage and how to leverage ChatGPT as an EA, and so that is changing. Do you have any thoughts or any kind of insight as to how you see this, or foresight, I suppose, into how you see the role changing based on the changes in technology?
I think it depends on the organisation, because I know there are several, I can think of several off the top of my head, who have like a complete ban on it because of the nature of the work they put out. So they don't want people relying on it and then presenting that information to clients without it being fact checked and their own research behind it. So I think it depends where you are and what type of environment it is. But I think as an assistant, if you have access to it, you'd be crazy not to use it, because you can suddenly lean into areas of work that perhaps you wouldn't be able to before. You can give starting points for executive work just by being able to get a framework from ChatGPT, for example, for your CEO to look at. So I think it's exciting, and there's a lot of scope, and just to get really clever about it and strategic and see how it can play to the areas that aren't your strengths, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think you're right. I've heard this kind of sentiment thrown around a few times, and I absolutely am in this camp. But I've heard it said that AI in the near to mid future is not, and ChatGPT, it's not going to replace our roles, but it will replace people who can't use it, essentially. So the people that will be in demand are the people who can leverage and utilize and interact with, because I think, in my experience, and I've been using it, and we could go in a very different direction, but I won't. I could very easily talk about AI and all of that, but I won't do that. So I think with how I've been using it, what I've really realized is how much time you need to spend working with it. You can put in something, get a response, and it is just so average. It is super average. You would never want to just kind of regurgitate that work that's come out. But what it's very good at doing, when you're very used to it and you spend a lot of time with it, is sort of doing a lot of the bulk output that you can then put your critical eye over, and you can sort of cross-reference and fact check and tweak and put in your own tone. And I think it will take a human at every point to work with it, to not just, and I'm sure you've seen it, but on LinkedIn, you can see the posts that are just ChatGPT posts, the capitals, the emojis, and I don't even stop to read them anymore, because I just go, that's a ChatGPT post. There's so much text in there, and I just scroll on. And so I think for EAs, for anyone listening, for anyone in sort of office work or the types of roles that we're in, I think people will really benefit from utilizing it. And I do go on about this a lot, so I'll have to curb myself.
No, you're quite right. But even if you think about, well, in my career, I had so many draft communications come across my desk from communication specialists on behalf of a CEO or a chair. And I would still have to go in before I could pass it on and put their tone on it and put, their lens over it, which you can only have when you partner with someone, or you have that level of visibility. So I see ChatGPT and AI in the same way. Like you said, I don't think it will replace us, but it will certainly, if you can't use it, then you're going to be in trouble. It will never replace human EQ, I don't think.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I saw a LinkedIn post the other day that said anyone who is concerned about whether this is going to take over our jobs and change our roles, it's all you have to do is lean in. And this is particularly relating to recruitment, but the post said all you have to do is lean into the human side. If you're seeing lots of ChatGPT posts, share a video. If you're seeing lots of text and really long emails, send a voice note. And it's like, how can we lean into the EQ? How can we lean into the human side of it? And that allows us and enables us to do the one thing that the robots and the AI and the technology can't do. It can't be a full human. Might be smarter than us at some point soon, but they definitely can't replace us.
That's really good advice, and it's smart business advice too, if you want to stand out in the landscape.
Absolutely, because there will inevitably, exactly what you said about industries, this will inevitably be adopted quickly by certain sectors, and it will be resisted, and they'll be slower to kind of take it up sectors as well, and there will be ones that will be left behind. So I think it is all about embracing it, and in thinking about sort of, I guess, ChatGPT is obviously an example of how you can free up people's time, how we can free up our day to day. But my perception on the role of an EA particularly is that there are so many things, so much weight of responsibility, but so many different day-to-day tasks that could very quickly, I mean, we all feel it in all of our day-to-days. In terms of the burnout piece, I know this is something that you're very passionate about, and it's obviously what your business is about, but could you speak to us about your own insight or experience in working with individuals or organizations around whether it is people in general or particularly EAs, whichever you think, but how are people managing the juggling, the hustle, the pace at which they are being required to work these days?
Oh gosh, this is something I could talk about all day as well.
From ChatGPT to well, this is your soapbox. So
I'm trying to streamline my thought bubbles right now, but I think we've become, well, it's my hope. This certainly at the start of the pandemic, there was a lot of compassion around understanding that we can't be all things to everybody, and we have to put our mental health and our general well-being first and foremost. And I think there are still threads of that remain, but we're in danger of slipping into that business as usual as things were some time ago. And this is a tipping point for humanity. We have this golden opportunity, this great big shake-up. Do we want to go back to the way things were, or do we want to keep those conversations that we started because we had to for our collective well-being, what is it, 3 years ago now? Do we want to keep those going? It's too easy to let them go. And once it goes too far away, it'll be really hard to rein it back. So what I'm finding is with the assistant community, people are still taking on more than they should. And it's, I think, by the very, nature of the people who are attracted to do that work, it's helpers, people who really, really, really want to help other people look good and make life easy. And with that comes saying yes, 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 yes. And if you're a very, if you are a high performer, more will come to you because they know you'll find a way to get something done. So it's having to be one of the things that I talk about with the assistant community is be really discerning about what you take on. Is this yours? And if it's not, and it's appropriate, deflect it back to where it came from, because you can't, if you're spread too thin, you're not doing a great job. And something that I help organisations see is that if their assistant community is burnt out, it's a sign that the rest of their organisation will be too. Because if they don't have the space to thoughtfully and strategically plan time for others and think about how they're keeping work moving, then chaos just reigns, and chaos also floods down. So if you have a leader who is out of control, then that impacts broader teams and everything throws off kilter. So I see it as a bit of a ecosystem that's symbiotic and all relies on each other. But I see assistance as being this really important part of the piece to keep well and not overwhelmed and overloaded. And then there's the tricky way that needs to happen, and they need to be empowered. They need to feel self-empowered to say no, have boundaries, and show up in a way that allows them to thrive. That's a long answer.
No, honestly, as you were talking, I was like, I want to come back to that point. I want to come back to that point. It was a really, really good answer. And I think you're exactly right. I literally was picturing organizations that I've worked in, organizations that I've recruited for, where from the top to the bottom, it's chaos, as you said. It feels like, I think I can picture it so perfectly that and I've noticed it in our organization at times where last year, for example, when the market was as crazy as it was post-COVID, everyone was hiring. I'm picturing our assistants and they would have just had consultants going, help, help, help. And everyone kind of not even knowing which direction to look in. It was that busy. And of course that filters down to every role. And of course it would have been coming from the top in that instance as well. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it is something that it tends to be, as you said, it's an ecosystem. It tends to be across the board, and it's a very important thing. It's almost like, as you were describing it, I was thinking of it like a temperature check. It's like they are the people to check in with, to go, how are we coping as an organization? How are we faring? Because if it's absolute chaos here, you can pretty much write that it's going to be chaos elsewhere as well.
Exactly. The canaries in the coal mine.
Yes, exactly right. That's exactly the way to put it. And you mentioned about boundaries as well. And that was something that I really picked up on that you said, because I think with executive assistants, you're right, the roles that they're doing, the nature of their personalities, and also the perceived success in their role comes down to saying yes and then delivering things in a good way. So how do you think, we do have a strong EA community, but also of course this relates to individuals as well in any workplace, but with the being asked to do things, like how do you think people can go about saying no in a boundaried way that doesn't poorly reflect on their willingness or eagerness to do their job?
Yeah, it's really tough. It's easier for me to say than do, and I've been there as well. But I think it comes back down to really understanding your own priorities and those of the person you support, and are you going to be able to help them meet their strategic objectives, the things that they're on the hook to do if your attention is scattered. And I think a really strong team environment is one that shares capacity, has really great open lines of communication. Hey, my boss is away this week. If anyone needs help, flick something over to me, so that you can work cohesively as a team without any competition and nobody becomes overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So it's not quite a straightforward answer, but I think separately to that, and this is something that I was guilty of in my career, is that whole thing of trying to be too bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I'm really responsive. If you write to me at 9 o'clock on Thursday night because you need something tomorrow at 6 p.m, I'll answer you at 9:05 p.m. Like being really cautious and discerning about who you're available to and when, and also not being responsive if you genuinely don't need to be out of hours. I was someone who I had to retrain myself. I couldn't not read everything, but I wouldn't reply to everything if it didn't need it, because you're training other people in how they have access to you. So there's a little bit of self-discipline around that for self-preservation. And then also separately understanding that as an assistant, if you email someone outside hours, if you action that straight away and pass it on, you're creating that culture of people feeling like they need to be on. So yeah.
You're so right. And it's something I feel so strongly about. We have a very strong sort of no out of hours, like from the top. There's nothing that you don't get chased after hours. I went through burnout in my first year of Lotus. It was successful very quickly. And I had adrenal burnout and chronic fatigue and all of the fun stuff that you get from getting your nervous system completely on overdrive. So having gone through that, it's really given me a lens of leadership that I'm very happy to kind of lead from a place of balance rather than from a place of flogging and needing to work 12-hour days. I've done my time there and very happy to park it. But exactly that, I think even when I email someone, be it internal or external, probably particularly external, I have an expectation in my head of when I'm likely to hear back from them based on how they've interacted with me previously. So if that person is usually really responsive and they don't then respond to me within a few hours, I go, that's weird. It's been a while since they've come back to me. That's odd. I better chase them. But if it's someone else who is completely boundaried and usually comes back to me after a couple of days and I know where I stand with them, I give them more leeway, I give them more time, and I give them more grace. And I think that's something that I often think of, because we don't need to be in recruitment. We get back to people so quickly. We're so responsive. But the out of hours thing, I completely agree with you on that. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, it really is. And like you, I've been through burnout as well, twice, and it's not fun. And I love sharing that experience with people, because in a lot of ways it was my own behavior that led to it as well. And I feel like there's a bit of a sense of shame around saying I've got too much on my plate, or I can't deliver that, because the job descriptions in themselves don't set assistants up to be human. If you read the language and you read between the lines, they want someone, must be composed under pressure. Well, you're under pressure all day, every day. Where's my moment to, when do I get the grace to to fall apart or take a break? Everything in there sets out that they want a superhuman.
Yeah.
It doesn't leave much room to be imperfect, perfectly imperfect.
It's a really good point, and I'm sorry to hear about your burnout, but I'm sure you agree that it is a life-shaping experience. It definitely gives you lessons and learnings that you can apply. And as you said, it's happened to you a couple of times. It's by no means something that, okay, I now see the world in a different way, and so I'm absolutely going to never go back there again. Of course, we all tip into bad habits, hence for me why I'm on this meditation course this week. But it's something that you absolutely can bring. The learnings and the growth and everything that comes from that experience. But you're right, we have done a lot of work within the tech space, recruiting for people in culture and support roles, and those job descriptions and interview processes and expectations are that they want people with pace. And so it's always the people who are quick and fiery and responsive, and that's literally the fit. And if you're not that person, it's not the right fit. It's not right for that industry and that sector. And it's fascinating because, as you said, working well under pressure, it's essentially just working from a place of adrenaline and fight or flight all the time. Like, that is essentially what it is.
So bad for you.
Exactly, which is why our poor nervous systems are completely dysregulated and they've no idea what's going on, and we all end up in burnout, and then our brains stop working and all the rest of it. So it's something to be very aware of, and I think the work you're doing within it is so valuable. And I think the fact that so many people are reaching out to you directly to self-fund their own progress and growth and learnings, it just speaks to the thirst and hunger, I think, for people to really want to make sure that they're working in a way that is balanced. And to your point previously, when you were first talking about burnout, I resonated so much with what you were saying. It resonated with me in terms of the post-pandemic. And literally this podcast was created from that, when work isn't work, when it's feeling like you're in flow and you're doing what you love. And everything about this podcast was about that post-pandemic life and the lessons and the learnings that felt like I wanted to root into something that felt like, although the experience itself was obviously huge and awful, and so many, it just goes without saying, all of the dreadful things that came from it, I really felt like I wanted to be wedded to the good things that had come from it, which is why we started these conversations. And of course, naturally, they've taken a different shape as the months have gone on and the years have gone on. But I agree with you. I think having some sort of, I think to go back to exactly how we were before it all happened would be a shame. It would be a tragedy. It would be also completely insane of us as a society and humanity. It's like there was lessons in that, like, let's cling to them. Human connection, the way we work, the work-life balance, the fact that, and I think, to be honest, in how I work personally, I now do 4 days a week instead of 5, which I started doing when my parents were here on a 1 year. There's 2 months left of their 1 year trip, but I've been working 4 days a week instead of 5. I've been strict with finishing times. It's something that I absolutely preach with the team. And so I think I know that for me personally, how I work is very different to the pre-pandemic experience. But I do feel like there's a lot, exactly as you said, that we can all take from it, that we should take from it, that can help us moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the sentiment. I love where the podcast came from. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to keep making sure that we can, keep capitalizing on those silver linings that definitely came.
Absolutely. And look, from a recruitment perspective, I think we have definitely seen a shift in what individuals and employees and candidates want in their next roles. People are moving and they're looking for values-based leadership. They're looking for employee-focused incentives and perks. They're looking for hybrid working and balance and remote options. And that is only, all of that is only available since the pandemic. And so there has definitely been, we're at risk of picking up the pace and sort of going back to how we were, but I think there has been seismic shifts and differences, that what essentially makes employees happy at work now is very different to what it was 3 or 4 years ago, which is refreshing to see. There's always a lot of work to be done. I don't think we ever will be done, but it's definitely something that we have seen a big difference, and I think that's been led by candidates with the need then for organizations to pick it up, which will inevitably elicit change.
Such an interesting power shift, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's definitely the pendulum is swinging back the other way because of the state of the economy and the fact that there has been some redundancies, and this definitely kind of sends it slightly the other way, but it's still hard to find good people. And so we're kind of, it will be a bit of a power balance. But I think the changes that have been made in the market and it have been made by employers, they will now change, or it will now stay, because they changed at the point where it was minimal expectation and minimum sort of demands from employees were that you have to be focused on the people. And so that's definitely shifted, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And my last question for you, touching on everything that we've sort of covered, which has been vast and I've loved it, is thinking about a piece of advice for someone. You're playing to your strengths, you're working to your strengths, you're loving what you're doing. I'm definitely feeling like in the work that I do that it doesn't feel like work a lot of the time. It often does, but I'm also in flow and I know I'm playing to my strengths. If someone isn't feeling like this, if it was someone listening or either someone that you were coaching and they were really feeling like they were in a rut or just not loving work, what one piece of advice would you give as a starting point for them?
I love this question. I think for me, with my own experience, every time I've found myself in that state in my career, it's been because I've lost touch with myself. I've given too much of myself away. I've steered too far away from the things that light me up and excite me. So my advice would be to stop thinking about work altogether and have a little bit of self-inquiry and think about what it is that lights you up and when was the last time you were in flow and what were you doing, and just get back to getting to know you, because I think we can put so much focus and expectation on career having to be this one way or this one thing, and work goes through ebbs and flows. You know, the economy shifts with the pandemic, everything changes. Just come back to you, ground back into yourself and think about what is it that will light me up, and focus on something outside of work. And that might be learning a specialist skill, or, you know, reconnecting with friends. And I find that when our outside work is going really well, we don't feel as ground down by a rut, and it tends to resolve itself. But if it is strictly that a role is feeling stale, something like that, and looking for greener pastures, I always think there is just a little bit more you can squeeze out of an environment. So what on-the-job learning can you do? Is there a project? Is there something you haven't yet leveraged or exploited or stuck your fingers in? And try that first and squeeze out that bit of extra on-the-job experience, because when you leave and start somewhere else, you're so busy learning the new environment, you're probably not expanding your skill set anyway. You're just, it's Groundhog Day of starting again to hit the ground running.
I love that idea so much, because so many individuals would assume that you're finishing up in a role, you're getting ready to close off, your whether you're actually handing in your notice or whether you're thinking about doing it and you've actually just kind of already signed off without even letting anyone know, without even maybe knowing yourself, that is when we do start to sort of almost go down. Whereas, as you said, if you can at that point pick up new skills and start flexing that muscle with a view to setting yourself up for the next learning process, it's a really interesting way of looking at it. And it's something that I don't think happens very often. I think people kind of assume rest now and then be ready for the I guess the full blast of training. But that's a fantastic point and a really good way of looking at it. And I love the advice on reflection. It made me think of the senior candidate I met recently. She was a senior exec. She was absolutely fantastic. And she said, I was just looking for what's next. I made it up as far as the director level that I wanted to go, and I felt an emptiness. And so she said, I just went on a journey of self-reflection. I worked with a coach for 8 months. I spent time. I really looked into kind of what made me tick, exactly everything you just said. And by the end of it, she said, I am so clear. I am so clear on my values. I am so clear on what I want. I am so clear on what I don't want, what I'll settle for, what I won't settle for. And now going out on the market, she said, I just have no fear or concern. She just said, I know the right thing will come up because I have such clarity around it. And I think that's it really reminded me of what you said, because it's a similar piece of advice to kind of focus on introspection in the first instance.
I'm glad it worked out for her like that. That's so good.
I know, exactly right. It's the way to go.
Yeah, and that kind of clarity bleeds out into everything you do in life as well. So it's never a wasted exercise.
Exactly. And it's almost tying in exactly with what one of your first points were with it, which is that some of the most senior CEOs that you've seen, the thing that makes them stand out is the fact that they have invested so much in their own personal development. And I think that's why. I think it's because they spend that work and that time doing it. And so they have clarity, they have the awareness. And so you're moving through life with a really strong intention rather than just wading through it, figuring things out as you go, which a lot of us can do as well.
Yeah, autopilot rarely pays dividends, I think.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's easier, so we fall back on it. Rachael, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I absolutely love this conversation, and I know so much of our community will enjoy listening to it as well. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I could talk to you all day.
I know. And you know what? It's funny, actually, when I say earlier about work not feeling like work, when I'm in conversations like the one I have just had with you, this is not work. This is like just connection and so inspiring to me. And I absolutely love it. So thank you for making work not feel like work for the last hour.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the experience too.
An absolute pleasure. Thanks.
This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au.